Look at that explosion! Oh my God! Let's get out of here!
Explosions in St. Petersburg and Moscow caused a state of emergency evacuation and the metro being blown up.
Muscovites, people from Moscow,
Are in panic. High-rises are burning. Russia is plunging into blackouts. A series of attacks on power plants in the Moscow region.
God, I hope no one was killed. Oh my God. There was just smoke. Oh my God. Fire.
Russian air defense, while shooting down Ukrainian drones, is hitting its own targets.
Missiles, including advanced missiles.
Are blowing up Moscow skyscrapers.
That building got hit in the corner and now smoke is coming out. Is it on fire or what?
Sheremetyevo and Domodedovo airports are not operating. There's a lockdown there. The Dyagilevo and Saki airfields have been blown up.
It's really burning over there. You can see the flames.
Putin's strategic aviation. The Tu-95s are under attack. Let's discuss all this with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev, on November 7th.
The digit 7, which is also known as the number 7.
November, Reuters reports that after the strikes, the port in Tuapse has halted fuel exports. Drones have attacked the largest power plant in Russia, the Kostroma GRES.
God, I hope no one was hurt. Oh my! There was just smoke. Oh my!
There are explosions, a fire on the premises of the facility. The Kostroma GRES has an installed capacity and is the third largest thermal power plant in the Russian Federation. We attacked Simferopol. There's an oil depot on fire there. Krimneft is beat. Military bases and airfields in occupied Crimea were also attacked. In Volgograd, there was a strike on Lukoil Volgograd refinery. We also attacked the Lukoil Kstovo oil refinery. Today, Russia is experiencing a series of large-scale blackouts. Over the past 10 days, we have attacked 10 thermal power plants. The first blackout occurred in the Moscow region, and there are also protests. In the major key cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg, musicians, migrants, and even Russian nationalists. What's happening? Is it a revolution or not? We'll discuss this with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev. Ruslan Kabich, welcome.
Dasha, thank you, and greetings to you and to our esteemed viewers.
There is a turbulent situation in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Nationalist marches, migrant riots. The National Guard and the FSB are joining forces to carry out arrests and raids on migrants. They go out into the streets with bats, fighting. It's just some kind of crazy brawls happening. Musicians are singing anti-Putin songs like Swan Lake. I want to look at the sea. Let the swans dance. But they get arrested, and that's also the work of the Russian security services. What do you think?
It's clear this is classic societal behavior when the authorities are weakening. When the people's patience runs out, or at least when there is widespread dissatisfaction and serious grievances against the authorities, and a lack of trust in the government emerges. And all this discontent manifests itself in different ways. For example, the same migrants, thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands who work at various enterprises, these people have already started experiencing delays in receiving their already meager wages. For instance, an average Russian, a local, doesn't go to work at the gas processing plant in his city because the salary there is only about 27 to 32,000 rubles. But migrants do travel there. They bring them in and often herd them in. On the one hand, they publicly deport or expel about 100 to 200 people officially, but on the other hand, they bring in thousands. Why? Because even the few enterprises still operating in Russia are at risk of shutting down. This is the trend and the behavior we're seeing. And why are migrants expressing dissatisfaction today? Because those meager payments have stopped or are being paid out irregularly. As for the rest of Russia, the whole country is sinking deeper into serious problems day by day. They've started looking for someone to blame, never the authorities. They're always looking for someone. Well, of course, it's the migrants who are to blame. They came here and now they're being blamed for all the problems in Russia. And then they formed a group of women from Ryazan, Ivanovo, and Kostroma who would come to government offices and ministries in Moscow and demand, give us the lists of Jews because they're the ones responsible for all the troubles in Russia. Jewish lists are already being actively compiled with claims that they were deliberately planted, that they're intentionally destroying and undermining Russia. So this diverse, multifaceted, and motley behavior, all of it points to the fact that the authorities are weakening and that governing the country is becoming increasingly difficult. And just a moment ago, you were talking in detail about the various different types of operations that Ukraine has carried out and conducted in a number of different areas and regions within Russia, destroying and damaging things like power plants, oil refineries, industrial facilities, and so on. And all of this, when considered together, creates and contributes to a certain mood or atmosphere. Right now, Russia is entering a period of turbulence in every sphere. There isn't a single area in Russia where they could say, thank God, at least here things are good, we can focus on something else. Everything is falling apart for them, everything is breaking down, and everything breeds distrust. And winter is coming. Winter is coming, and just imagine any city. Let's not take Moscow. Let's leave out St. Petersburg. Think of Ryazan, Ivanovo, or Perm, or Nizhny Novgorod. These are not small cities. And if an entire district's heating system, for example, fails, or if a substation that supplies electricity goes out, what then? And outside, it's minus 30 or 40 degrees Celsius. All of these people are unfortunately doomed either to freeze in the harsh, unforgiving cold or to be thrown out onto the streets in this bitter, relentless winter weather. That's why the coming winter will be a very serious test. For some reason, I'm convinced there will be riots, but to provoke Russians into rioting and to predict riots would be self-deception. They don't rise up in riots. When your home is like a refrigerator, a freezer, and it's impossible to live there, at the very least, they'll have to hang around outside. And as one viewer wrote to me and said, Ruslan, wet firewood doesn't burn, it only smokes. Who will bring them dry firewood? Out on the street, they'll be cutting down trees and pretending that this wood is burning and keeping them warm. That's the current state of things in Russia itself, and in Moscow in particular. I'm always interested in Moscow's behavior from different sources, from different communities. For example, I have good, very good, well-established relationships with Tajiks and Uzbeks. We have direct relationships, we call each other, and they talk about the peoples of the North Caucasus. Everything is tense, like a string that's been over-tightened and is about to snap. This is the state that Russian society finds itself in today.
Alexander Mikhailovich, of course, we will talk about blackouts, strikes on thermal power plants, and Madyar's work. But I would like to ask you about these marches of Russian nationalists that are taking place in Moscow. Do you think these are marches of discontent against Putin, or are they just marches that have no real meaning? No.
These demonstrations are not directed against Putin himself. Rather, these marches are carefully organized, and these groups are deliberately created by the FSB, the Federal Security Service. Absolutely nothing happens there without the involvement or oversight of the FSB. It is enough to say, as was mentioned here a bit earlier, that if, for example, two young women who are musicians go out and do anything at all, even if they simply hum a tune or play something on the guitar, I don't know, anything, even a melody that seems suspicious, they are detained, taken away, and criminal cases are opened against them. This is Russia. This is the FSB, the Federal Security Service, trying right now. Yes, they are actively trying. Until Russia completely collapses and kills everyone in the ruins, they are still trying to get out of the war. And this discontent is specifically against Putin, so that somehow, before this crisis, before Russia's collapse, they can get out of there. The Russian marches are organized by the FSB. This is at the level of, let's say, the more uncouth part of the population. They blame everyone except themselves. At the same time, at the level of Dugin, Prilepin, and others, Glaziev, that same deputy in some state dumas, they have also started, and this is no longer coordinated with the FSB, but rather an independent Russian way of thinking, to spread the idea that Jews are to blame for all their troubles. So just imagine, at the bottom, among the more uncouth, there are accusations against migrants, while at the top, they have now started spinning this narrative that it's all being done deliberately to destroy the Russian country, the Russian state, and that it's the Jews who are behind it. These are two opposing movements. These two locomotives racing along the same track will eventually have to collide at some point. And there's no way to escape this problem. That's it. And why, people ask, why is the FSB doing this? The FSB is doing this because having power and authority, having, let's say, the ability to control society, they want to stop this war. The FSB doesn't want to fight. The FSB understands that in the end, the result of the war will be that they will all be buried under the rubble of power. They want to become a player who will participate in negotiations with the so-called Ukraine, with the so-called Europe, in order to remain in power and in control of post-Putin Russia. That's the main secret behind their behavior. But Putin doesn't. For Putin, any negotiations mean the end. It's a conflict. It's a significant conflict occurring at the very highest level of state power within the Russian Federation.
Alexander Gavrilovich, in your opinion, why is the FSB joining forces with the National Guard to fight migrants at this moment? Because I looked into it, and these raids against migrants, against migrant riots, are being carried out as a joint operation by the FSB and the National Guard.
But the National Guard, by its very purpose, by its official charter, and by its established regulations, is specifically supposed to participate in such activities and operations. The National Guard and the FSB, however, are not allies, nor do they cooperate or work together in any official capacity. This is not if, say, some offenses or street disturbances occur. In that case, the National Guard, once again, according to its regulations, is supposed to be involved there. And that's all there is to it. I mentioned this a little earlier. If they are officially deployed, we are shown how Tajiks, Uzbeks are rounded up. There we see 200, 1,000 people. On the one hand, they are being taken out, but at the same time, more are being brought in. On the other hand, if 1,000 are taken out, 5 or 10,000 are brought back in. Why? If the presence of migrants in Russia is stopped now, Russia itself will come to a halt. No one will work, nothing will move. Russians have stopped working. Those Russians who remain, the young people, have been taken out so that these riots and all sorts of persecutions at the level of society, on the streets, at the very lowest levels, are all that's left. There are no people. And in order to get anything done, migrants are needed.
Now let's move on to the attacks by the armed forces of Ukraine. As a result, one of the largest electrical substations, the Kostroma GRES, was destroyed and attacked. We know that almost 10 thermal power plants have been attacked in the last 15 days. Madhya is operating flawlessly. We are attacking oil refineries, power substations, and accordingly, we are attacking oil terminals like in Tuapse, which has completely suspended its operations. How do you assess the strikes by missiles and drones on Russia's energy sector?
I think, not just think, in fact, I am absolutely convinced of it, that it is, without a doubt, precisely Madhya, the highly skilled and strategic commander of the drone forces, who is actively paving the way, carefully creating and establishing the routes and pathways that missiles may, and most likely will, eventually follow. The damage and destruction caused by drones and the damage, devastation, and catastrophic impact that can be inflicted by missiles are vastly different in scale, magnitude, and overall effect. If, for example, drones manage to shut down an oil refinery for a week or a month, missiles could leave nothing but a crater where that refinery once stood. In other words, even afterwards, this industrial facility is no longer considered. It simply doesn't exist anymore. We already know that oil refineries are now appealing to the government, to Putin, asking for financial support so they can restore their facilities, because they can't keep up with repairing the damage from new attacks, especially in the cracking units where oil is processed and gasoline, diesel, and fuel oil are separated and delivered as pure products. This part is being destroyed because without it, you can't get the finished product. It's a very important part. You can only buy this part of industrial production either in Europe or in the United States of America. It's impossible to officially purchase it elsewhere. Just imagine you buy it through some 10th or 53rd party, bring it in, restore it, and then there's another strike, a greeting from the Magyar, and destruction. And this keeps repeating. I'll say it again, just to make it absolutely clear And to emphasize the point, strikes with cruise missiles are expected, and that includes possibly even Tomahawk missiles. And, well, excuse me for repeating myself, but there are missiles from Britain. There are also missiles from Germany. And these missiles, yes, their range is a bit shorter. They can't fly 1,500 kilometers like the American ones can. But even so, in the near border regions, let's say at the level of Voronezh, Belgorod, Kursk, Oryol, Lipetsk, and not to mention the Rostov region, they can also destroy targets there. So it's a grim outlook, and the situation remains very concerning. The threat is real, and it should not be underestimated, especially for those living in these areas close to the border. Right now, expectations in Russia are bleak. They're bleak because if they start destroying infrastructure, specifically energy facilities, how are those supposed to be restored? In Ukraine, as I've said many times before, when I was there and traveled near the border, I saw long lines of various Ukrainian vehicles with trailers in the back, and on those trailers were small power stations, diesel engines generating electricity. The resourcefulness of Ukrainians, they find ways out of difficult situations. They don't rely on Zelensky. They don't ask anyone else for help. They solve their own problems. And of course, that's a big help for the Ukrainian state. In Russia, it's different, especially among Russians. Historically, they're used to having a master, some kind of feudal lord, or the Russian authorities, Putin, solve all their problems for them. I understand non-Russians like Chechens or people from the Caucasus, they, just like Ukrainians, have learned through life to solve their everyday problems themselves. They will find a way out of any situation, but Russians from Bryansk, for example, they just wait for the authorities to come and take care of things, but the authorities don't have the means. And from all this, it follows that Russia is now facing very serious problems. And that makes me very happy, to be honest with you.
Let's move on to international politics. The Pentagon has approved the transfer of Tomahawks to Ukraine, but Trump has so far said no. And here is the main question. Why, in your opinion, is Trump saying no? When will he say yes? And how will that change the course of the war? Trump
is blackmailing Putin. From the very beginning, you and I have talked about this many times here on this platform. Even at the very beginning, when Witkoff and Kirill, Putin's special envoy, and Dmitriev met there, Putin promised something to Trump. Trump knows for sure that if he capitulates on Ukraine, he will get something in return. An asset, I assure you, a considerable asset. And here, well, forgive me, as they say in one joke, Kirilo Budanov does not agree. That's it. That's the argument. Ukraine does not agree to be capitulated. And so let's agree on this point. Excuse me for a moment. Let's come to a mutual understanding that what we are saying is that Trump is blackmailing Putin and is attempting to force him to act in a certain way, even though he hasn't capitulated Ukraine. But let's be honest, let's admit it, by not providing the crucial weapons and military support that Ukraine truly needs, he is in reality weakening Ukraine. And this is Trump's deliberate behavior. Trump has always been on Russia's side. He has always been on Putin's side, and he continues to do so. And when he gives something to Ukraine, he has no other choice. It's only because he has no way out. And today, what? Is Trump in a cheerful mood? Nothing of the sort. There has never been such distrust toward a president in history. Historically, 67% of the population of the United States does not trust him. Americans do not trust him. To get out of such a crisis, he truly has a great deal to do. And that is precisely why I, like all of us, am waiting for him to send Tomahawks. In the end, he will inevitably be forced to provide those Tomahawks because Ukraine will continue to defend its country, standing strong and determined. They will keep fighting, keep waging war for their country. And in order to truly stop this war, he will have to do it by force. And what kind of force is that? Force is when Ukraine puts such pressure on Russia that it actually starts to fall apart, that Russia begins to collapse. We haven't even talked about the economy yet. Russia's economy is much stronger, much more significant than the front, because there, things are in decline. Newton's law, the law of free fall, is at work there. The economy is in complete free fall. And so, all things considered, it shows that the situation in Russia is very bad, but they refuse to admit it. And now Trump is blackmailing them. He's blackmailing them, but so far, you see, he hasn't done anything.
Slava Gavrilovich, a very important topic is Venezuela. We don't know whether the Maduro regime will be overthrown now. How exactly? The Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Politico have all published articles saying that Trump has only three scenarios on the table, three options for a military intervention or special operation against the Maduro regime. It is reported that most likely Maduro might flee to Russia, and here is the main question. Do you think that the Maduro regime could fall in the near future, which would mean that Venezuela would establish new economic relations with America, the oil market would change, oil prices would catastrophically drop, and Putin simply wouldn't have the money to wage war against Ukraine?
Let's break everything down step by step. It's not as simple as the media makes it out to be. Today, Trump is in a very difficult situation, as I mentioned earlier. Let's go back a little bit. The Nobel Peace Prize, which Mr. Trump was aiming for, who actually received the Nobel Peace Prize? It was awarded to the lady who leads the opposition in Venezuela. In other words, these people who influence global processes needed to make a statement. They needed to present this lady as a significant figure. And they did just that. By doing so, they signaled that there is an opposition in Venezuela, that there are people trying to overthrow Maduro. Now let's return to the United States of America. Trump is not trusted. Right now, there is complete disillusionment with the United States itself. What, above all, is considered a sign of prosperity for Americans? I want to remind our viewers about this, though I'm sure they already know. Gasoline and diesel prices at the pump are an indicator of whether the government in America is fulfilling its commitments or not. Yesterday, literally just yesterday, there were mayoral elections in New York City and in two states, New Jersey and another state, where the Democrats won. Trump is suffering defeat, and that's why he needs Venezuela like air. Of course, he wants to get Venezuela in order to flood the market in the summer of 2026 with oil and wear and tear. He needs to lower the prices of petroleum products in the United States in order to sell this to Americans. I promised, I delivered, so that in these midterm elections in Congress, in the US Senate, the Republicans would get the majority. This is an operation of that kind. It's not because, let's say, Venezuela is selling drugs. Let's take American experts. They just took it and explained. Those boats that they shot at sea, they say that in order to make it to Miami, they would have had to refuel 3 or 4 times along the way. The people who survived the sinking of those boats didn't even file any complaints against them. Why? There were no drugs there. It's made up. They're just making this up to justify occupying Venezuela. And now let's get back to that part. Why is that? Trump took over Venezuela without any resistance. Well, excuse me, maybe Trump didn't take that into account, but the situation has changed. I want to remind you, a week ago, a Russian heavy cargo plane, an Antonov 24, landed in Venezuela. It's already been confirmed that they transported S-300 and S-400 systems there, and they also deployed Wagner PMC operatives by airlift. I want to remind our viewers that Venezuelan ships have been spotted off the coast of Iran after being loaded for several weeks, and then there's China. And China has clearly shown its stance, indicating that it supports Venezuela. So what do we have now? America essentially wants to overthrow Maduro, and to do that, they need to take control of Venezuela. But now there are 3 players involved, China, Russia, and Iran. And they are not just going to protest for the sake of it. They have actually started arming Maduro now. And in order to service, say, the same missile defense and air defense systems that they will be supplying there, they also need to send specialists. So things are getting more complicated. Trump wants to get everything done very simply. But this isn't just about making a deal. This is geopolitics involving countries with their own interests. I understand that Venezuela is under a Caribbean crisis. We remember how it was 50 years ago and now. I understand that America will win, but is that really a victory? What does it mean to win? That they will overthrow Maduro, send the oil to America, and prices will drop. Is it really in our interest when prices fall, when oil becomes cheap? This is good for Ukraine, but we need to understand the reasons behind it. Who is the initiator of all this, and what side effects there might be in the geopolitical behavior of other players, primarily Russia, Iran, and China? That's how it is. I would briefly and quickly give an assessment of what is happening now and what actions might result from all this. Yes.
It's very important that we discuss this. Friends, please like this video and write a few kind words in support of Ukraine in the comments. There are 800,000 of us. We did it. Thank you so much. It would have been impossible without you. President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev, Ruslan Mukhamedovich, I sincerely thank you and, as always, see you next week.
All the best, Dasha. Take care. Dear viewers, we truly need to get Dasha to an amazing milestone of 1 million subscribers by the end of the year. Let's all work together on this important goal and, of course, give Dasha a special New Year's gift.